Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are plunging headfirst into one of the most, intellectually difficult and I'd argue the most unpopular practices in Stoic philosophy. It's this deliberate cold shower for the soul exercise of imagining the loss of everything you currently possess.
It immediately sounds miserable, doesn't it?
Right.
It sounds intentionally pessimistic, like a philosophical downer. When people first encounter this idea, this concept of premeditatio malorum, their initial, almost knee-jerk reaction is to push back.
Yeah, they say why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why should I dedicate mental energy to thinking about losing things when everything right now is fine?
Yeah.
I have my health. My job is stable. My family is here. I have my coffee. Why would I deliberately poison that?
And that initial resistance, that's precisely the friction point we need to unpack today, because that reaction, that pushback, it's built upon the core illusion the Stoics spent centuries trying to dismantle.
No.
We are almost universally living under this fundamental delusion that the stability we experience, our health, the presence of our loved ones, the safety of our home, even just the rhythm of our next breath, is something the world owes us.
That expectation, that sense of entitlement to consistency, that's the pivot point of the entire philosophy.
Yeah.
The Stoics saw that humans are perpetually trying to escape the reality of universal impermanence.
How do we do that?
Well, by accumulating possessions, by locking down rigid expectations, and creating this highly effective but ultimately fragile false sense of security. We call this process living. But from a Stoic perspective, it's often just a highly curated, elaborate denial of change.
Our sources, they really reflect this. I'm thinking of Marcus Aurelius in his personal notes, Meditations. He repeatedly stressed that everything around us is only temporarily dwelling.
Right.
He wrote about the swiftness with which things vanish, both people and objects, just reminding himself over and over that nothing is truly ours in an absolute guaranteed sense.
And the problem isn't that we don't, intellectually know that things change. We all know that. The problem is that we live every single day with the absolute expectation that our things, the things we value, the things we rely on, are the exceptions to the rule.
Right, it applies to everyone else.
Exactly. If we were truly viscerally aware that these comforts were just temporary borrowed gifts, we would treat them with such exquisite care.
Yeah.
But because we gather stability and expect it to persist, we're perpetually shocked and devastated when change finally arrives.
So the mission for this deep dive is, I think, pretty clear. It's a shortcut to radical clarity. We need to move past that initial negative reaction and really understand why embracing temporary loss is the ancient secret weapon for cultivating true gratitude.
And for achieving genuine presence right here today.
Yeah, it's not about pessimism.
No, it's about preparation. It's about transforming passive possession into active, engaged appreciation.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The Stoic secret to true gratitude lies in embracing temporary loss, and understanding that mechanism is how we get to that radical clarity. So when we dive into this idea of imagining loss, we have to start by clarifying the goal, the intent. We've established it's not meant to make us sad or morbid. So, what is it meant to do?
It's designed to be a spiritual wake-up call, a kind of preventative intervention. Think of it less as a philosophical practice and more as an inoculation, a vaccine.
A vaccine of the spirit. I like that.
Exactly. It's intended to hit us with the reality of change in a mild, manageable dose before the full, devastating reality of genuine loss arrives. It's the difference between hearing the fire alarm during a scheduled drill.
Where you can calmly assess your route.
Right, versus hearing that alarm when the building is actually burning and it sends you into a panic-paralyzed state.
That's a perfect metaphor, because we are generally only truly grateful after something bad has happened.
Yeah.
You don't appreciate the ease of your breath until you have pneumonia. You only recognize the importance of financial stability after a sudden job loss. You only understand how dismissive you were of a loved one's time after they're gone, even for just a little while.
And by that time, the opportunity for genuine appreciation, for kindness, for focused presence, it has often vanished. The thing has left your hands, or the relationship has changed so much that the original opportunity is just gone.
So this is why the practice jumps in now, today, with a simple but profoundly challenging what-if question.
Right.
Let's bring that question into focus for you listening. The practice asks you to pause and just internalize a scenario. Maybe it's, if tomorrow my primary source of physical comfort, my comfortable bed, my reliable car, my strong body was taken from me, would I treat these things differently today?
Or the one you mentioned earlier, if tomorrow the person I love was suddenly unable to communicate with me, would I treat them differently in this next hour?
Think about the immediate psychological shift that question creates. It's a temporary disturbance, sure, but it creates a small blinding area of light in the mind.
It really does.
Suddenly, your ordinary evening, which you might have filled with, I don't know, passive scrolling or impatience, it transforms into something worth actively preserving. That simple text exchange, the shared meal, a mundane chore, it becomes a gift because you've momentarily visualized its absence.
It reduces indifference instantly. It's a confrontation with missed opportunities. And that indifference is the direct byproduct of the delusion of infinite chances.
Yeah, that's it.
We treat our time, our relationships, our own cognitive function as if they're renewable resources,
Yeah.
a never-ending buffet, when in reality they are finite, one-time use gifts.
And this is exactly why Epictetus insisted on this idea of temporary holding. He used that powerful analogy of possessions being like guests in your home.
Right, he said, it is not what we love that we possess. We are only allowed to temporarily hold it. He compared our lives to attending a banquet, where you can partake, but you're not guaranteed a permanent seat or an endless supply of the food.
We hear that, we nod along, maybe we share the quote online because it sounds wise. And then we immediately go back to living as if that statement applies to every single person in the world except us.
We act as if we're the exception. The one exception to the universal law of impermanence.
And that's the challenge the Stoic practice addresses directly. Our modern instinct is to avoid pain, to push away difficult truths, to distract ourselves. Stoicism demands the precise opposite.
It's an active exercise in discomfort, and it's designed to bring about a profound realization.
So we imagine loss to truly see what we have. We look directly at fragility so that we might learn gentleness and patience and care.
And we accept impermanence not as a failure of our expectations, but as the fundamental nature of reality. To truly appreciate the smallest moments, the warmth of a blanket, the taste of coffee, the sound of laughter.
And here's the paradox, right? The central realization. Instead of generating despair or fear, this practice actually leads to calmness, to ataraxia. Why is that?
It's because if you truly accept and understand that everything can leave, you stop clinging to things so anxiously. You stop holding on so desperately, so rigidly.
You appreciate the current state without being enslaved to the outcome. You honor the relationship with awareness, rather than with this panic fear that the person will vanish if you don't control every little interaction.
Exactly. When you know you are only a temporary steward of something precious, be it health, wealth, or relationship, you treat it with exponentially more care than if you believed you owned it forever and could neglect it without consequence.
So the person who clings suffers more.
Way more when the inevitable shift happens. The person who practices this sort of temporary release, they find freedom in the moment of possession itself.
So the key takeaway here is it's transformative. Stoicism isn't trying to force us to live in anticipated suffering. It's demanding that we elevate our awareness today so that we see the true, unrepeatable value of what we have before the suffering or the loss ever arrives.
It's all about preemptive appreciation. Now, to understand why this ancient exercise, invented millennia ago, is so vital for the psychological health of the modern person, we have to look directly at the world we live in. We are born into what you could call the readily available age.
An age that has completely distorted our sense of normalcy. Everything is instant, frictionless, scalable. Electricity is just on. Water flows from the tap. Communication is instant, food appears at your door, information is a single touch away.
And in this environment of, relentless convenience, the natural human capacity for appreciation, which historically was constantly reinforced by scarcity and difficulty, it's gradually worn down without us even realizing.
We're not bad people.
Not at all. It's not that we are innately more ungrateful than our ancestors. It's that our system is specifically engineered to obscure the fragile conditions that support all this convenience. It makes gratitude a constant uphill battle.
It's the constant, reliable supply that's the villain here. If everything is always easy to get, why would you treasure the effort, the logistics, the sheer luck that enables it? You lose the sense of the miracle in the mundane.
And Seneca spoke to this mechanism centuries before Amazon Prime existed.
Right.
He observed that humans suffer tremendously, not because they lack things, but because they suffer from forgetting. They forget they once lived with very little, or they forget the struggle that went into acquiring what they now treat as just background noise.
That forgetting, that's the core psychological mechanism of ingratitude. Easy access creates this grand toxic illusion that permanence and predictability are the default state of the universe.
It detaches us from the reality of natural impermanence that Marcus Aurelius was always writing about.
This brings up a foundational psychological law, one that's constantly being violated today. If things come too easily, will the brain still register their value? When the effort is removed, when supply feels limitless, the brain just stops registering the item or the experience as valuable. It becomes accustomed to receiving, to having, to adding. And in that process, it slowly loses the ability to feel thankful for simple things.
Like the warmth of the sun on a cold morning.
Yeah, or just the functionality of a pain-free knee.
And this erosion is painfully clear in our personal relationships. This idea we could call relationship blindness. When someone is a constant presence for years, we literally stop seeing them as a complex, vulnerable human being who has a choice to be there.
Their presence becomes normalized, just part of the background.
Exactly. We stop seeing them as a person who can tire, who can be hurt, or who can genuinely choose to walk away. They become, like you said, like furniture in the house, always there, seemingly motionless, guaranteed. We rely on their function without ever appreciating their form, their spirit, or their effort.
But I can hear a listener asking, wait, if I constantly focus on my partner possibly leaving, doesn't that become a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or just generate chronic anxiety? Where is the line?
That's a crucial distinction, and the Stoics were extremely precise about it. Anxiety, that toxic rumination, is the fear generated by trying to control the external outcome. So if I worry about my partner leaving, and then I try to manipulate their actions to prevent it, that is anxiety and clinging. Stoic contemplation, however, is simply observation. It's accepting the premise of impermanence.
So it's more like they are here now.
They are here now. I have no guarantee of tomorrow, but I have the opportunity to appreciate them fully and act rightly today. That shift from clinging control to grateful presence, that's the difference between panic and tranquility.
That makes sense. And the irony is still that we only recognize our blindness when that person leaves, even for a short trip or if a minor health scare happens. It's the momentary absence, the sudden fragility that forces the mind to recalculate value.
And this is why Marcus Aurelius continually reminded himself of the vastness and volatility of the universe. He told himself, remember the change of the universe so you won't be surprised when familiar things change with it. He wasn't advising pessimism.
No, he was recommending a pragmatic awareness.
An awareness that nothing stands still long enough for us to ever be justified in taking it for granted.
So modern convenience acts like this giant, comfortable, padded wall, sheltering us from that natural rhythm of change. It convinces us the sky can't fall, or at least not over our heads.
But the law of the mind is fixed. If we never recognize the fragility of things, we will never truly be grateful for them.
And so Stoicism steps into that void created by modern life's illusion of stability. It's not trying to scare us by saying everything will disappear next Tuesday.
Not at all. It is simply stating the essential truth. They are not guaranteed for you for even a single second. And when we genuinely remember that our body is functioning, that our job is secure today, that awareness dissolves indifference, it converts energy from worrying about the future to appreciating the present.
So, we aren't ungrateful because we're bad people. We're ungrateful because we forget that everything is mutable and temporary. And this exercise, imagining loss, it's just the mirror that reflects that forgetting back to us, compelling us to look. Okay, so if we accept that modern society has created an environment that actively discourages gratitude, we need to understand the mechanics of this system. When the Stoics talk about loss, they aren't just thinking about big, major events. They're interested in the subtle, small, silent movements that society uses every day to strip away our appreciation.
And these mechanisms are insidious because they operate as the accepted norms of modern success and comfort. They quietly turn temporary gifts into expected entitlements.
Right, so mechanism one, artificial abundance and redundancy. We touched on this, but let's go deeper. Modern society demands immediacy. Our entire infrastructure is geared towards frictionless, instantaneous delivery.
Food in 15 minutes, texts in seconds, endless streaming entertainment.
And our minds adapt to this breakneck speed and convenience. We internalize the assumption that this speed and quantity isn't some logistical miracle, but a mandated universal requirement.
And the consequence of that is devastating. Seneca's principle, what comes too easily is slighted, is hyper-accelerated today. When something is immediately replaced, a slightly dented package, a broken phone, a forgotten food order instantly refunded, we lose all sense of effort, of rarity, of fragility.
We stop seeing the temporary conditions that support the ease.
Exactly. I mean, consider the feeling of white-hot rage when a delivery arrives 10 minutes late. That emotion is only possible because we have completely forgotten the complex, vulnerable logistics chain behind it. The driver, the app, the chef, the power grid, the road conditions. Imagining the loss of the delivery system itself makes a 10-minute delay a total non-issue. It restores perspective.
Okay, mechanism 2, the illusion of control. This one might be the most spiritually exhausting modern trap. We are relentlessly encouraged to maximize control, to optimize every aspect of our lives.
We track our sleep, count our steps, monitor our mental health with apps, map out rigid 5-year plans.
And we fundamentally believe that if we just quantify and optimize enough, we can dictate the health of our body, the trajectory of our career, and the reliability of our relationships.
Which is an absolute philosophical error. It's a direct contradiction of core Stoic thought. Epictetus was so clear. Suffering is the direct result of trying to control things outside our domain, things which are, by their very nature, indifferent to our will.
We only control our actions, our judgments, our character.
That's it. And the paradox here is that the more we try to possess or lock down or control external factors, our blood pressure, our stocks, our child's future, the more anxiety we feel about losing them. And that anxiety actively cannibalizes any gratitude we might have for the present functioning state of those things.
So the Stoic imagines loss to reveal what is not controlled,
freeing up energy to perfect what is.
Right. Mechanism 3, continuous comparison. The rise of global digital interconnectivity has created an environment where we are constantly exposed to millions of others, or at least their highly curated highlight reels.
And this generates an instantaneous, overwhelming, and corrosive feeling of not enough. We're measuring our internal happiness, our wealth, our fitness, our relationships against the filtered, often fictitious standards of strangers.
And this comparison leads directly to the paradox of sufficiency. If a person sets their gratitude threshold at, say, I will be thankful when I finally have a house as big as my friends, they will never, ever be grateful.
The goalpost perpetually moves because the standards are external and infinite. Stoicism fundamentally flips that equation. Sufficiency is not a warehouse of objects, it's a state of mind and internal calibration. Gratitude has to be practiced in the present, exactly where you are with what you have.
And imagining the loss of everything external instantly nullifies that comparison.
It does, because the only thing left to assess is your inner state, and that's a state no comparison can touch.
Okay, mechanism 4, mental distraction and absence. Marcus Aurelius viewed this chronic state of mental wandering, what we now call distraction, as a profound sickness of the soul. We are rarely truly present in the moment we occupy.
We eat without tasting the food. We sit with loved ones while looking at our phones. We read without absorbing the words. We are perpetually running from the current moment, thinking about the next task, the next notification, the next obligation.
And if the soul is sick with distraction, gratitude is literally impossible.
It is. Gratitude demands deep, focused presence. It is the act of looking deeply, intensely, and specifically at this very moment and the conditions that support it. The modern mind, trained by constant notifications, just treats the current moment as a frustrating bridge to the next moment.
Imagining the loss of a simple moment, a walk, a conversation, it jolts us out of that future orientation. It forces us to recognize that the present moment is the only one we're guaranteed.
And therefore the only one worth appreciating fully.
And finally, mechanism 5. The misdefinition of assets. Society teaches us that true assets are tangible things that can be bought and insured and leveraged. Houses, bank accounts, devices, corporate titles, status markers. We cling desperately to these external markers.
The Stoic definition is radically inverted. True assets are the things no one, no economic downturn, no natural disaster, no personal betrayal can take away from you.
Your character, your tranquility,
your integrity, and your ability to correctly distinguish what you control from what you do not. The power of imagining loss is that it serves as a philosophical pressure test. It strips away the illusion of those external assets, the bank account, the title, the social approval, and reminds us that the only quality that endures the shift is inner quality.
So when we face that mental experiment of losing everything external, we naturally feel that panic of having nothing to cling to.
But the Stoic response is incredibly reassuring and gentle. In that void, you will find you are forced to cling to the right thing, to yourself, your virtue, and your trained judgment.
That simplicity is the ultimate clarity. Society teaches us to cling to what can be lost. Stoicism teaches us to look at what cannot be lost.
But to get there, you must first dare to imagine the complete loss of everything else. So let's delve into the deep-seated psychological habits of the mind that make this practice so necessary. Our minds are strange, often self-sabotaging instruments. They have this bizarre flaw in perception. They almost never accurately identify true value while something is present and functional. They're only startled into recognition when the thing is missing, damaged, or disappears.
It is the ultimate human blind spot. That ordinary glass of water on your desk is worthless to you until you're genuinely parched. The simple pain-free morning walk is unremarkable until you wake up one day with an agonizing injury.
Even that slightly annoying, repetitive reminder from a loved one to text when you get home, it seems like a needless intrusion until the day nobody asks that question anymore.
Seneca noted this tragedy. He observed that we don't lack things, we just lack the ability to truly see and register what we currently have.
And modern psychology confirms what the Stoics knew. The mind is primarily trained for pursuit, not for satisfaction. We are perpetually geared toward achieving the next thing, the next promotion, the next purchase, the next relationship milestone.
So if we're constantly trained to chase, to acquire, to look forward, that natural momentum means we can't stop, be still, and just contentedly treasure what we already hold in our hands.
Correct. And Stoicism doesn't demand that we halt all ambition or pursuit. It just demands that the pursuit doesn't blind us to the value of our present state. The successful application of imagining loss redirects that energy from acquisition to appreciation.
Okay, but what about the second major hurdle, which is the avoidance of pain? If contemplating loss is painful, isn't avoiding that pain just sensible self-protection? Why would you intentionally inflict that mental discomfort on yourself?
That's a reasonable protective instinct. We avoid thinking about the possibility that tomorrow might be different, believing that this denial somehow prevents the emotional cost. But the Stoics saw this avoidance as just compound interest on future suffering.
You're not preventing the pain.
No, you're bottling up the inevitable shock. When real loss occurs, the job termination, the diagnosis, the separation, the mind is hit with a storm because it was never trained to absorb the possibility. The shock of the realization that things were never guaranteed is often worse than the loss itself.
We lack psychological preparedness. Like Epictetus warned, what truly makes us suffer is not the event itself, but our panicked, untrained judgment about the event. If the mind is unprepared for the possibility of impermanence and loss, our catastrophic judgments will destabilize us and compound the suffering long before the actual reality even touches us. The imagination of loss is judgment training.
And this avoidance fuels the final, most dangerous clinging habit, the illusion of demand. Intellectually, we know we don't own the time of our loved ones, or the stability of our health, or the guarantee of tomorrow. Yet we operate every single day as if we have an inherent contractual right to demand that everything remain constant, predictable, and available to us on our terms.
And what does that demanding look like in everyday life? It's subtle, isn't it?
It's everywhere. It's demanding zero traffic on our commute. It's demanding instant, perfect customer service. It's demanding that our partner always anticipate our emotional needs without being asked.
Demanding that our body never ache.
Yes, or that our children always follow the optimal path we've mapped out for them. These demands create constant friction with the reality of an indifferent, chaotic, yet magnificent world.
So if we bring the Stoic exercise to bear and ask ourselves, if everything I have is only borrowed for a limited time, would I dare to live differently now? That one question reveals the core issue.
Which is that we live based on the fantasy of ownership, the illusion that we possess things absolutely, and that fantasy is the quiet killer of gratitude.
Imagining loss is the tool designed to strip away that illusion of demand and ownership.
Right. It is not about teaching us to become fatalistic. It's about teaching us to give up the fantasy of infinite stability. We have to consciously let go of the rigid expectation that loved ones will always be healthy, that our bodies will always be young and reliable, or that professional opportunities will always return.
And when you successfully release that demanding fantasy, you immediately see the truth. The small, everyday, consistent things we take for granted. That is precisely where the unrepeatable, true value of life resides.
Marcus Aurelius understood this power of presence perfectly. He advised himself to look at everything as if seeing it for the very last time. Not for despair, but for the purpose of living fully and heightened awareness.
And when you truly look at a loved one, or a meal, or the blue sky as if it were the final viewing, you don't feel morbid. You feel a profound rush of life and connection.
The person who practices this softens immediately. They become more gentle in a handshake, more attentive during a conversation, and more respectful when they look at their own aging reflection.
So the Stoic answer to that anxiety question is clear. We are not asking you to fear the future. We are asking you to look clearly at reality.
Fear is the reaction of the one who desperately clings. Tranquility is the response of the one who fully understands and accepts the nature of change. Imagining loss doesn't cause pain. It generates awareness. The profound pain is reserved for those who lose something they never truly realized they could lose in the first place.
So the suffering comes not from the eventual loss itself, but from never having practiced the truth that everything is inherently temporary. We've established that this is a powerful, profound philosophical concept. But how do we take this intense mental exercise and integrate it into, say, our Tuesday afternoon routine without collapsing into a pit of chronic anxiety? Stoicism is fundamentally practical. It demands clarity, not fear. We need sustainable strategies.
And the change has to be built on small, intentional shifts in our daily interaction with the world. Because, as we identified, our habits of ingratitude are also built on small, daily transactions and assumptions.
Okay, step 1, practice loss in safe doses. Our sources are emphatic about avoiding the extreme. Imagining the full-scale tragedy of loved ones' deaths every morning is excessive and counter-stoic.
Right, it leads to paralyzing rumination, which is just another form of attachment. We want mental training, not emotional abuse.
So this is the intentional application of that vaccine of the spirit.
Exactly. We confront the truth of fragility in a mild, controllable dose. Instead of the massive tragedy, focus on small, immediate, specific potential losses. For example, during your morning ritual, ask, what if I woke up and the electricity was permanently gone? Not just a blackout, but gone. You immediately appreciate the simple reliability of the lights in the coffee machine.
Or, what if I lost my sense of taste for the rest of my life? That contemplation heightens the taste of your next bite.
These small imaginations instantly place you into a state of heightened awareness. You're training the mind to be grateful for the baseline. And the guiding question for this safe dose practice should always be actionable, not emotional.
If I lost the specific small thing for real, what action would I wish I had taken, or what attention would I wish I had paid to it today?
That question anchors the mind firmly in the now. It moves it out of the destructive fantasy of the future.
Step 2. Practice gratitude through action, not emotion. A lot of people misunderstand gratitude. They treat it as a passive emotion you wait to feel before you express it.
But feelings are transient and unreliable. Actions are durable, and they create feedback loops. Stoicism encourages us to give gratitude a concrete, physical shape, regardless of the emotional weather.
So this means substituting that passive internal acknowledgement for small, specific, tangible acts of appreciation. Instead of just thinking, I'm grateful for my lunch, take a minute of silence before eating to specifically acknowledge the complexity of this arrival.
The hands that prepared it, the logistics that moved it.
Exactly. Or instead of just being happy your partner is there, send a heartfelt, specific text of appreciation about some small, recent action. You don't wait for the feeling, you create the feeling through the action. You force the brain to register the value.
Marcus Aurelius emphasized this. Reverence should be an action that leads to emotion, rather than waiting for emotion to dictate action.
Step 3. Distinguish control. This practice is only tranquil if we understand its limits. Imagining loss is not some secret tool to control the future or prevent bad things from happening.
It is explicitly a tool to remind us that the future is not ours and that external outcomes are indifferent. The only thing we truly own and can perfect is our intention and our behavior today.
We cannot guarantee our loved ones will remain healthy forever, but we absolutely can choose to love them kindly, deeply, and honestly today.
We can't keep our physical bodies perpetually young or pain-free, but we can choose to care for them with immediate respect and attention today. This razor-sharp distinction reduces the agonizing pain of trying to protect what we fundamentally do not possess.
It grants us the freedom of knowing we are acting rightly within our true domain of influence, regardless of the eventual outcome.
And that leads to step 4, release demandingness. This step is purely psychological decompression. It's not about letting go of people or healthy relationships. It's about actively letting go of the demands we place upon them and upon the universe itself.
The demand that they remain constant. The demand that life be inherently smooth, easy, and painless. The demand that we must always receive more or better.
Seneca's insight applies perfectly here. The richest person is the one who needs the least. When we imagine loss and practice this temporary non-possession, we start to need less external guarantee, less rigid predictability, less emotional assurance.
And we therefore begin to see and appreciate more of the volatile, magnificent reality that we currently possess.
Releasing these demands doesn't make you weaker or passive. It makes you psychologically lighter, more resilient, and instantly more appreciative of the present baseline.
So the ultimate goal of this Stoic strategy is peaceful confrontation with impermanence.
Yes, you're trained not to flee the truth, not to anxiously cling to illusion, and not to engage in blind, naive optimism. You simply face the day with open eyes and say, today, in its complexity and its fragility, is enough for me to be grateful.
And if loss inevitably comes, the mind is trained to absorb it without panic.
And if it doesn't, appreciation flourishes into genuine tranquility. This is the happiness of a person who is no longer pulled by the conflicting, exhausting strings of fear and anxious attachment. #OTRO.
This deep dive into the Stoic practice of imagining loss has been a powerful exploration. It reveals that the relentless convenience and redundancy of the modern world have collectively made gratitude a sophisticated skill. It's something that has to be trained deliberately, rather than just being a default state of mind.
We saw that the core Stoic message captured in this difficult exercise is not one of morbid pessimism, but of radical, necessary maturity. We have to face the changeability of the universe, the reality that everything we value is merely borrowed, to truly honor its temporary presence.
The person who constantly avoids the uncomfortable thought of loss is the person most likely to be utterly shocked and destroyed when loss inevitably arrives. But the person who dares to look straight at tomorrow's possibility of change is the one who understands and maximizes the value of today better than anyone else.
And that realization brings us to the ultimate thought we want to leave you with, the profound realization of this entire practice. Only by daring to vividly imagine losing things do we learn the subtle, difficult art of truly keeping them.
Not physically.
No, not physically, but in our memory, in our actions, and in our active, present appreciation. Because genuine gratitude comes not from the mere fact of having, but from the clear-eyed understanding that we could lose it all in the next moment.